All right. I think in this video, I'm going to start a series. I don't know if it's going to be a mini series or a longer series, but it's going to be a series of videos, and there might be, a good space in between each one. But in these videos, what I want to do is lay out the chronology. I don't even know if I said that right. Of Revelation. And I'm going to start here by actually getting in the middle of the tribulation. And I'm going to start here in Revelation chapter 9. And I'm going to sit here and say that this fifth angel sounding his trumpet is right about at that midpoint. And I'm going to explain why I say so. So in order to do that, we need to take a look at what it says here. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven onto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. Okay, so here we see a star falls from heaven when this angel sounds. And that's how this all starts. Everything that he's about to say is all because of when he sounded, a star fell from heaven. Now, when we come over here to Revelation chapter 1, it tells us here at the end of the chapter, at verse 20, the mystery of the 7 stars which thou sawest in my right hand, and the 7 golden candlesticks. The 7 stars are the 7 angels of the 7 churches. And the 7 candlesticks which thou sawest are the 7 churches. So here we see a kind of decoder. You want to know what is being talked about when it says stars? It's talking about angels. So when we're coming back over here to Revelation chapter 9, and it says, a star fell from heaven, you got to understand that an angel's being kicked out of heaven. And this is key to understand why I think this is at the midpoint. So let's continue what is said about this angel sounding and what happens, and then we're going to move on, okay? But we actually got to go over this to better understand why I say this is happening at about the midpoint, right? I don't know if it's exactly there at that midpoint or a little bit before it. It's definitely not after. It's right at that point, right? So about 3.5 years in, and I'll explain why I say 3.5 years in as I go through this video. So it goes on to say, at verse 2, and he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. So it's almost as if when this star falls, it slams into the earth, kind of like an asteroid, a meteor, crashing into the earth, and it breaks open the earth. And this is what ends up opening up the bottomless pit for something to come out of it. And what's interesting about this bottomless pit is that in the scriptures, it's also referred to as the abyss. And the abyss is in a reference to the sea, the ocean. And its great deep is looked at as the abyss. Because you go look at the ocean, it appears just bottomless, right? Especially at the time this was written. They wouldn't be able to know if there is a bottom, right? They wouldn't be able to get there, right? So it's just this endless deep, right? And you notice that when this hits, it puts the light out, right? It darkens the sun, right? I think this is literal, but it's also, metaphoric, that the light is put out. Darkness has come, right? And at verse 3 it says, and there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. Now, you know what's interesting here is I believe it's Mark chapter 16, where Jesus says that believers are going to be able to trample over snakes and scorpions. All right? So true believers don't have to worry about these scorpions, right? But if you're not a true believer, yeah, you got to be worried. And if you feel convicted and a bit spooked by this, that's probably your conscience being tugged on by God, trying to get you to get right with Him. So, best to respond to that while you can. While it's today. Anyway, verse 4. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. And in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. So here, these creatures, they don't kill people, they torment them. And I think this is very interesting, because these people will desire to die and not be able to die. And this is another reason why I think this is at the midpoint of the tribulation, because I believe before the midpoint, the mark of the beast has been given out, but in a way that it's not necessarily forced. It's just very heavily coerced and pushed and urged for you to take it. First, just offered as a free gift, then, some incentives, and then they start, restricting things, right? And at this point, when these scorpions come out, I believe it's tormenting those people who have the mark. And that's why they can't die. Because this mark that is going to be given is not just some tattoo. This is something that is life-changing, life-altering, where you're no longer human. You're no longer part of mankind. As long as you're part of mankind, you can be saved. But when you take this mark, I believe it changes you in 2 different ways. I believe it changes you biologically with you mixing with the fallen angels, the iron and clay mixing. They will mingle with the seed of men as they did in the days of Noah. Nothing new under the sun. You taking this mark, you're going to be taking on fallen angel genetics, and most likely that of Satan himself. And you're also going to be mixing with nanobot technology so that you're all going to be intertwined in this kind of hive mind thing here. And it's going to promise you to take care of all your problems. Even grant you immortality, like in the garden. You shall not surely die, right? And that's the thing. It's not going to let you die. So even when these things are tormenting you, it's basically like those all old mythological stories of the gods torturing other gods by cruel and unusual punishments, such as a guy being chained up and having an eagle come every day to eat his liver, and then every night his liver would grow back just for it to happen again the next day, over and over and over and over, right? That's the kind of thing that we see going on right here. And to continue, go to verse 7 here. It says, And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were as it were crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men, and they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions, and they had breastplates as it were breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle, and they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. So they only get 5 months to do this, but you can see that this creature seems to be some kind of amalgamation, and it even brings up metal. So it seems like even these creatures are some kind of chimera of insect and man and other mammals, and then also machine, metal, right? Just like I was talking about these people with the mark of the beast. Just some mixing of things that ought not to be mixed together. Right? And then this thing that's said interesting here at verse 11. This is why we had to go through the whole thing here. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. Now, I believe this angel of the bottomless pit is Lucifer, Satan, who is the first, basically, black hole, right? He separated himself from God, and now he is empty and void, and is the angel of the bottomless pit, of the great deep, where he has a hole within him that only God can fill, right? And the name Abaddon, Apollyon, is destroyer. Like a black hole, it just devours everything. And the act of devouring is an act of destroying. Right? So we got this destroyer, right, coming up out of the bottomless pit. And this is in Revelation chapter 9 at the sounding of the trumpet from the fifth angel. Right? So keep that in mind here. And we're going to go over here to Revelation chapter 11 here. And this is where John is told to measure the temple. This appears to be the temple on earth. So we know that there's going to be a temple. Right? This is very key here. There's actually going to be a physical temple. And here in verse 2 it says, "But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months." So it's over there in Jerusalem. So 42 months is 3.5 years. Each month is 30 days, and we see that in prophetic terms throughout Revelation. A 30-day month, a 12-month year, and it is measured out in years, months, and days. I think it's 1,260 days, something like that. And here at verse 3 it says, "And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth." So you see, for when the temple is built, we see the Gentiles are going to tread it for 3.5 years, and we have 2 witnesses preaching for that 3.5 years, right? And then at verse 7, after the 3.5 years, check out what it says. "And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them and kill them." So we see here that that beast that comes out of the bottomless pit, which appears to be that angel of the bottomless pit, Apollyon, Abaddon, he comes up about 3.5 years in. We see that he comes and takes out the 2 witnesses, right? So he might have come up out of that pit a little bit before they finished their ministry, but when he comes up, seems like one of the first things he does is take out these 2 witnesses. Right? So now, when we come over here to Revelation 12, we read about a woman in heaven, clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars. This woman represents clearly Israel, the 12 stars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. I know some people say that it's Mary. Well, when Jesus ascended to heaven, as we read at verse 5, she didn't have to run away into the wilderness for 3.5 years. Mary never had to do that after Jesus ascended to heaven. So this is clearly not talking about Mary. And the church did not give birth to Jesus. Jesus actually gave birth to the church. So this is not the church either. This is clearly talking about Israel. That's the only thing that makes sense here, Anything else doesn't add up. You're just believing it because you want to believe it, and you're too stubborn to be corrected, and that's that. But what we really want to focus on is that there is a great red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads, right? So keep in mind here that the crowns are upon the heads and not on the horns. So it's as the authority is given to this spiritual entity here. I've talked about in previous video, or I believe the beast itself is a spiritual entity, like the Prince of Persia is a spiritual entity, right? But the horn is the physical representation there of that beast, right? So it would be like, let's say, for example, America. The physical beast there, I would say, is Satan, because America is the feathered serpent. That's what it means. And we have a statue of Lucifer that we call the Statue of Liberty over there in Babylon, New York. And that spiritual entity, Satan, is the beast, right? And the horn right now would be Trump, right? He's the physical manifestation. But anyway, we see that this dragon, he draws a third part of the stars of heaven, then casts them to the earth, right? And when the man-child is taken up, this represents the rapture, we see again another 3.5 years. At verse 6 it says, "And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days." So we see that just like this woman flees for the 1,203 days. Sorry about that. My tongue was fighting with me there. Is the same time that the 2 witnesses are preaching. The 2 witnesses are preaching at this time. The woman flees, right? And then it talks about how there's war in heaven after it mentions the first 3.5 years, right? The first section of 3.5 years, it talks about the woman fleeing away after the man-child is taken up, after the rapture, right? Then it says Michael, he's going to stand up, like we're told in Daniel chapter 12. At the end, Michael's going to stand up for Daniel's people, Israel, the Hebrews, the Jews. And Michael fights against the dragon, and he casts the dragon out of heaven. That old serpent, the devil, right? And his angels were cast out with him. This seems to be at the midpoint of the tribulation, right? This war. They're cast out. And this is where I believe this is probably at the sounding of the 5th trumpet, where a star falls from heaven. And I believe the star lands on New York City because that's Babylon. And I believe that's when Babylon is destroyed. You know, one of the deadly wounds happens to the beast. And up out of there comes the locust. And now I hope you're starting to see why I believe what I'm saying here and this connection of what's going on. As you notice, after he's cast out, it says at verse 12, "Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time." Right? He gets a short time, and it tells us that time at verse 14. "And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great evil, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nursed for a time, times, and half a time from the face of the serpent." Now, I believe this is the second part, the second 3.5 years. That first 3.5 years already happened, where people fled. But then, after Satan comes down, I believe this is at the same time the one we call the Antichrist, goes into the temple, claims to be God. And at that same time, we got the fifth trumpet sounding. Satan is cast down. The Antichrist receives a deadly wound because he doesn't have Satan's divine protection at that time because he's cast down. I shouldn't say divine protection. I should say supernatural protection. To us, it seems divine, but an unholy divine, a satanic, hell-bound divinity there, right? Not true, godly, righteous divinity. Just to be clear on that, anybody think I'm saying something that I'm not really saying? But anyway, so we see there, he's cast down. This seems to be at that fifth trumpet. He's that angel that comes crashing down, and he knows he got a short time. He doesn't have 7 years. He has, as it says at verse 14, a time and times and half a time. A time is a year. Times is plural. If it doesn't give a number, if it's multiple, it's only 2, unless it gives a number. If there's no number when it's multiple, it's always just 2, right? If it says days, but with no number, then it just means 2 days, because it's just telling you it's multiple of 1, right? So time, times, so 2, and a half a time. So 1 plus 2 is 3, and then a half, 3.5 years, right? He doesn't have 7. By this time he's thrown down, he only has 3.5 years left. But now it says he has wrath, right? Now he's pissed. He's not being nice about it anymore. This is where you're going to see that you got to take the mark of the beast or you're done. And I'm going to show that as we go to the next chapter. Revelation 13, you notice here, he says he stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. So you notice here, Satan is cast down, that great dragon who have 7 heads and 10 horns, but the crowns were on the head of the beast because it was in the spiritual realm. Now, sorry about that, after he's cast down, the crowns are on the horns. So you see how now the authority is given over to the physical realm. It's no longer in the spiritual. It's because Satan has lost his authority. He's been cast down, right? So his authority has been passed on to the physical, right? And these 7 heads, you notice they come up out of the sea. And we already talked about the bottomless pit being a reference to the abyss, which is a reference to the ocean, the sea. And that's where the beast comes up out of, right? Right after we read about Satan being cast down from heaven and then up out of the sea. And in Daniel, we read about the place of the Antichrist is destroyed. I believe that is New York City, because I believe that guy is DJT and his abode is in New York. I believe that place is going to be taken out. And he's going to move, as it we're told in Daniel, his abode is going to be destroyed, and he's going to move his home to the pleasant land to build his, what does it call it, a palace? His abode is a palace, his home, something along those lines. I don't remember the exact wordage. And that's what we're reading here in Revelation 13. There's 7 heads, which appears to be potentially 7 continents, right? But one of them has a deadly wound. I believe that's when he came crashing down into New York, right? But the deadly wound was healed. And I believe part of this has to do with the spiritual power of the fallen angels through AI. I believe there's going to be 7 main heads of AI, one over each continent eventually. Right? And that's why when they take out one of the heads, it gives people hope. But when the head is revived, people are like, well, how can we fight against this New World Order system here? We can't do it. Right? It's impossible. They lose hope and they start to worship because of fear, not because they love Satan and the Antichrist. They're afraid of him, right? Just like we just read about Satan being able to continue for 3.5 years in the previous chapter. Well, it talks about the same thing here in Revelation 13 at verse 5. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 40 and 2 months. That again would be 3.5 years. Right? So, with that being said, you can see here that this is when he, at verse 7, makes war with the saints, right? No, he's no longer pretending to be nice, right? He guts to get his thing done, and he's going to do it however he can do it, right? And at this same time, it says a beast comes up out of the earth and had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Now we read about Babylon is fallen, but it says it twice, Babylon is fallen. Now I think that has to do with New York, and I think it has to do with this right here. I think the beast is something more spiritual, such as the fallen angels showing up as gods, right? The old gods, claiming to be alien saviors of the world, coming to save us from ourselves. And their connection with AI, I think all of that, and they're going to help with the technology to give us a big jump to push all this stuff along that's going on right now. All the stuff we see developing, they're going to give it a little kickstart to push it further along real fast, because he has just a short time, right? But this beast here, I believe this here, the one that people call the false prophet, I don't think this is the false prophet. I think what this is right here, the beast coming up out of the earth, right? He comes up like a lamb. Jesus, a lamb, came up out of Israel, right? But he speaks as a dragon. I believe what happens here is when that 5th trumpet sounds there, by that time, the man of sin, the Antichrist, has already been identified and has probably already been given a crown that has to do with being crowned king of Israel. And I believe that happens at the 6th seal. The Antichrist is given a crown and he goes forth conquering the conquer. I believe this has to do with Donald Trump and him given some special treatment by Israel, and he's going to help them grab more land, as Netanyahu says he wants to take the land between the Nile and Euphrates. And he's going to help build that 3rd temple, and I think it all has to do with that. And when that 5th trumpet sounds, war in heaven has been taking place. Michael casts down Satan. He falls, hits New York. That's where the bottomless pit opens up. Babylon is fallen. The beast comes up. And then the 10 kings come up shortly after, because those 10 horns didn't have crowns. By the time this happens, they got their crowns, right? And I think this lamb-like beast is actually the harlot, Israel. And by this time, the Antichrist abode, New York, has been destroyed. He moves to Israel, right? He establishes his abode there as the head of the New World Order, of the new United Nations or League of Nations. They might have a new name for it. I don't know what it would be. But you're going to have the whole world start to unite as a one world government, a one world religion, a one world economy, one world media outlet, one world education system, one world technology. But Israel's going to be the head, and the mark of the beast, 666, is going to have something to do with probably that supposed Star of David, which is actually the star of Rephaim, the star of Saturn, Kronos, or Satan. And I believe it's going to have something to do with that, with those two triangles, one facing up, one pointing down, has to do with male and female coming together, a mixing of things like angel and man, man and machine, man and animal. All right? Mixing these things together, an amalgamation, a chimera, which damns the soul. And this beast here, Israel, the harlot, is the one that actually gets people to worship the beast that was and is not yet is. Right? Who was cast down, but is back. You thought he was dead. Satan cast down from heaven all the way down into that bottomless pit, but he comes up. That's crazy, right? Makes an image to this beast and is going to force everybody to worship it or die. Right? You following with me so far, I mean? So now when we come over here to Revelation 17, we read about this harlot, right? And it says that this harlot is guilty of the blood of all the saints at verse 6. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Now, we know that the combination of Israel with Rome, iron and clay mixing together there, the start of it, put Jesus to death and put the Christians to death, right? And Jesus even said that the Pharisees are guilty of the blood of Abel all the way into Zacharias, I believe, is the father of John the Baptist, right? He says you're guilty of all that righteous blood that was shed. And so we can see here this harlot, I believe, is Israel. This is the lamb-like beast, right? Being a false prophet, a false John the Baptist, if you will, trying to claim that Abaddon, Apollyon, the destroyer, the angel that fell, is the one you ought to worship, right? Because all the legalists worship the one who gave us the knowledge of good and evil, the law from the garden, Satan, the serpent, Saturn, Kronos. Check out my video about that, about the Satan's law that binds us all to death, if you want more on that. And when we're told about this woman riding the beast, it says something about the beast that ties into everything that we've already been going over. And at verse 8 it says, "The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition." Right, so we already were reading about the beast that comes out of the bottomless pit, right? And the other place, out of the abyss, out of the sea, right? That's where the beast comes up out of. So you can see how when we read in chapter 9 about something coming out of the bottomless pit, then in Revelation 13, the beast comes up out of the sea. And now we hear in Revelation 17 that the seven-headed beast comes up out of the bottomless pit. So you can see the bottomless pit and the connection of the sea together. Right? So you see why I'm making that connection. You following along? And then you read here that it comes out of the bottomless pit and it will go into perdition. You know what perdition means? Destruction. Right? Apollyon, Abaddon, the destroyer. The beast comes up out of the bottomless pit to destroy and ultimately is self-destructive, just like any other narcissist, sociopath, or psychopath. Anybody who rejects God is just in constant decay, constant self-destruction and trying to bring everybody else into their mess of a black hole life, right? And it says, "And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is." So you notice something interesting that is said here. Just a side note. I brought up in Revelation chapter 3 where it talks about, at least I believe it's Revelation chapter 3, Sardis, talking about not blotting their name out of the book of life. You notice here it says those names who were not written in the book of life. So you see here, there's people whose names were never written in the book of life. If your name is written in the book of life, it's not going to be blotted out. But you see, the thing is you need to get your name written in that book of life. Because Jesus talks about how one of his disciples wanted to bury his father before he started following Jesus. And Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead. Right? Because he's referring to us as dead. He even says, you know what? It's better to cut your hand off or your foot off or pluck out your own eye if it keeps you from sin, so that when you enter into life, yeah, you may be crippled or maimed or something, but you're not going to be thrown into hell. So you see there, he says, you haven't even entered into life yet. You enter into life after judgment. Or if you accept your judgment now at the cross, you can die right now. Your past, present, and future could be given over to Jesus. You can die and be raised up with him in newness of life. Your judgment has already taken care of. You have passed from death to life, as Jesus says in John 5:24. Those that believe in him will not come into condemnation. They have passed from death to life. Your name is written in the book of life, right? But if your name was never written in there from the foundation of the world, they're the ones that are going to go after this beast because they never got their name written in the book, right? So we see here this beast, right? And you even notice it talks about the 7 heads. It talks about an 8th, but it's not an 8th. The 8th is one of the 7 that's revived, right? And it talks about the 10 horns haven't received the kingdom yet. That's why I was saying, you notice how their horns and the crowns are on the heads, not on the horns. But eventually the crowns go from 7 on the head to 10 on the horns, right? So this could also mean that the 7 continents can break up a bit. So now, then there's going to be 10 of them. Like something earth-changing is about to happen. Not saying it will. Just saying maybe it could be. Right? But you notice that the beast here is ridden by the harlot, which I believe is ultimately the false prophet. The lamb-like beast. Right? And by the end of Revelation 17, it talks about this woman who's the city that reigns over the kings of the earth. And the kings, I believe, represent those 10 kings. When they receive their crowns, they become kings of the earth. The 10 kings of the earth. Daniel's statue, the 10 toes, the 10 horns of the beast, the 4th beast in Daniel chapter 7. Right? They get their kingdom, but this woman, Israel, rules over them. Right? And this is talking about Jerusalem. That's going to rule over the kings of the earth at this time, and is the second actual fall of Babylon. The first was New York, at that 5th trumpet, Satan being cast down. And then this beast that comes out of that pit is established, and Israel's riding that beast, but just like in World War II, where Germany was actually helping out the Jews and actually trying to help them set up a new homeland. They tried to get them to have a homeland in Madagascar, but it ended up, they worked something out where they were going to start moving them to where they are now in Israel. And then they ended up turning on the Jews. And we're going to see the same thing happen here, where Israel is going to be basically ultimately running things, and they're going to turn on them. And as it says here, the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, at verse 16 here, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. And we see this where Israel, in Jesus' day, rejected him, saying, we have no king but Caesar. And then what did they do? They joined with Rome, but still didn't submit to Rome. They were basically still trying to control Rome. And then Rome, eventually in 70 AD, has enough of Israel, comes in and destroys them. And what's interesting is that they have a siege for 7 years. It's kind of crazy, right? And until they ended up destroying them in 70 AD and destroying the temple. And during that time, these unfortunate Jews here ended up having to eat their own children and stuff because they were too stubborn to surrender. Right? And as he says here, they're going to be naked and shall eat up her flesh and burn her with fire. And we see stuff in the Psalms about during this time of Jacob's trouble and in other places in the Old Testament about how they seek to eat up their flesh. Because I think there's going to be such a famine where cannibalism is going to be a thing out of necessity. Right? And then when you go to Revelation 18, it gets into a more detailed falling apart of the city of Babylon. And I believe at that time, it's going to be Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is already pretty well influenced by Rome. And I think it's going to be further mixed, as it's going to be mixed with Americana, which is basically Rome. It's all going to be coming together. It's going to be Babylon. And it's going to be more clear as they use this to set up the temple. And that's why it says the outer courts will be trampled by the Gentiles once they get this temple built. Because they're going to say it's a house of prayer for the world, for all nations. And that's how they're going to get the world to support building the third temple, to be in support of it and not fight against it. And yeah, so this is actually a short video getting into the chronology of Revelation in a bit of a different way. We're starting at the midpoint, so you can start to see things a little clearer, right? Where I believe Revelation 17 and 18 refers to two falls, because we're told, Revelation 14, 3 angels have a message. Did I pass it? Maybe I got the wrong chapter. Oh, yeah, it was right in front of my face. Verse 8. And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Her fornication, her mixing, right? We have no king but Caesar. They committed adultery on God and mixed with the god of this world and his governments, right? And then they passed that fornication on to all the nations to bring them all in on this fornication. And then they all end up turning on the whore. Right? So you can start to see from there, at this midpoint, I know it's a little weird to look at it from the midpoint. From there, you can actually start to go backwards and forwards from there. Because then you can see, okay, the fifth trumpet is about the midpoint. So things before that happen in the first 3.5 years. And then things about that time, like the sixth trumpet and on, are right around the time of the midpoint and on. All right? So this might help you in studying it. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm completely off here. But I would ask you to think about what I'm saying here, and even take the time to look into it yourself and just take the premise that I'm correct, go into it and see if it lines up. If it lines up, then be like, okay, it is correct. But like I say, check it as a boat. Is there holes in this boat? If there's holes in this boat, I don't want to get in it. So if you take it and be like, test it, be like, you know what, I don't see any holes. I think it's a safe boat. Let me go in it and just drive it around here close to shore. In case it sinks, I can swim back to shore. Let's see if it floats. So you take it out for a few hours. No water's coming in. I think we got something here. We can go out deeper in the sea with this thing. but you start to get water and be like, okay, there's something coming in. We're not quite sinking, but there's an issue. Maybe we got to work on that. Or maybe it just sinks. Be like, yeah, this is just a big hole. It just completely sunk. You're way off. Be like, all right, let's scrap it and start over. All right. So with all that being said, thank you for your time and attention. Please look into these things. Tell me what you think. And yeah, let me know if you think I'm biased or something, because I bring up DJ T a lot. Some people think he's gone, he's passed on. I think he may have some health issues, but I don't think so. I think he's just being hindered at the moment because of prayers, and God's doing some stuff. He's slowing him down. But that's just my opinion. I could be wrong. But with all that being said, don't forget to do what Isaiah said and seek out the book of the Lord. If you read English, that would be the KJV. And do what he said and put line upon line, here a little, there a little, doing what Paul said, studying that word, showing yourself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And then doing what John records Jesus saying, and keep the word, preserve it, protect it, hide it in your heart, so that God will keep you from the hour of temptation which will come upon all those that dwell upon the earth. And then Jesus will never be able to tell you, you do err, not knowing the scriptures. And with all that being said, if you want to help support this ministry, please like, subscribe, with the bell icon, share the video, share the channel, interact in the comment section. These things help out a lot. And I just got my TikTok channel banned again. So if you check out my TikTok stuff, most of that stuff is on here on any channel you're watching this on. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But if you use TikTok, my TikTok is some guy named JD 3.0. So, yeah, that's where I'm at now. I don't really have anything on there at the moment because, starting over fresh all over again, and got to get that algorithm working again, because now it's all just mindless garbage. I think that's the most annoying thing. Like, I don't mind starting over, getting content out there, but going on there and used to seeing some other people that I respect and the stuff that they bring out, and now it's gone. It's like, man, I should know better. I should write down these people's usernames and stuff, but I keep forgetting to do that. But anyway, I don't know what it was that got me banned, but something did. So if you want to help support this ministry to make sure I can keep on going no matter what comes my way, if you're able to, there's 4 ways you can donate to this ministry in the info description box if you so choose. And what would really help is your prayers. Prayers that I don't go against the guidelines, I find a way to even work around them, some loopholes and stuff if possible. But that God would protect these different outlets to reach people. That He'd continue to use me to do so, and use my ministry or ministries, I don't know how you look at it, to reach others. And that He would watch over all of us as born-again believers and protect us and provide for us until He comes and gets us. That would be fantastic. Just an amen in Jesus' name to that. Should be all we need. And thank you so much for watching. Take care. I'll see you in the next one, and may God bless you and yours.